Last year, Americans all across this country voted to reject the radical leftist ideology that was threatening the very foundation of our nation. And it looked like people were finally waking up, standing for truth, morality, and the values that built this great nation. But this week, it's like deja vu, because Americans from coast to coast just voted for the same destructive ideologies that we thought we defeated just last year. Virginians voted for a Muslim from India to be the lieutenant governor, and those same voters chose Abigail Spanberger for governor, who supports men entering women's locker rooms, who prioritizes illegal immigrants over American citizens, and who defends abortion up until the moment of birth. And those same people also elected an attorney general who once fantasized about murdering a Republican lawmaker and his 2 children. Have we forgotten what just happened to Charlie Kirk? Either people have forgotten, or worse, they're starting to embrace this kind of hatred towards conservatives. And then in New Jersey, they elected a woman with no policy, no plan, and no moral compass, someone whose biggest accomplishment is being part of a cheating scandal while she was at the Naval Academy. And then there's California, who just voted to make sure that Republicans lose even more seats in Congress. But maybe the most shocking of all came out of New York City, where they elected a self-proclaimed socialist Democrat, which is just another fancy name for one step away from being a communist. So not to mention, he's also a Muslim as well. So he's a Muslim communist. Can you believe that, in New York City? And I really wish that we had some historical example to show us how communism or even socialism actually turns out in the world. But wait, we do. We have Russia, North Korea, China, Cuba, Venezuela, and the list just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And every single one of them, they were a complete train wreck. Freedom gone, economy ruined, people oppressed. But yes, let's totally try it one more time. Maybe this time it'll work. New York City is going to be the next UK, the next United Kingdom, infected with Muslims running rampant in the city, causing more harm and damage that even the gang members will be scared. Islam and American values are not compatible. And did the people of New York forget about 9/11? But I can't say that I'm shocked that Democrats won in blue states. But what does blow my mind is that these kind of Democrats actually pulled it off. It's like the left has made it their mission to find the absolute worst people in society and prop them up as heroes. But the more radical, the better. The less common sense, the louder the applause, and it's almost impressive how consistent they are at celebrating failure and calling it progress. And they don't even try to hide it anymore. It's just, who can we find that checks all the boxes and wrecks the country a little faster? What's even worse is that Americans have become so brainwashed by the media and the system that they can't even think for themselves anymore. They just line up, pull the lever, and keep voting for the same lunatics driving the country off a cliff, all while convincing themselves that they're saving democracy. We are watching the same ideology that failed across the globe take root right here in America, and it's spreading faster than what many people realize. So what does this mean for 2026? What does this mean for our culture or for the future of a free nation under God? I'm going to break it all down, talk about more right here on the Battle Belongs podcast. Have you ever noticed how New Yorkers say they don't want the government in their lives, and they're out there shouting, stay out of our business, but in the same breath, they'll go elect a socialist mayor who wants to run every single part of their lives? You just can't make this up, but that's the reality of the Democrat Party. They say they want freedom, but they want freedom with benefits. They want free Wi-Fi, free housing, free healthcare, free college. This isn't the city that never sleeps. It's the city that never stops asking for free stuff. And this new mayor, yes, it's the guy that actually thinks that money grows on rich people. Tax the rich is what they constantly chant in the streets like it's some revolutionary battle cry. But what happens when those rich people pack up and move to South Carolina, or they move to Florida, or they move to Texas? What are you going to tax then? Good intentions, TikTok outrage? Because you can't fund socialism when all the people you're taxing are sipping margaritas in Miami. And here's the kicker. New Yorkers hate capitalism until their rent is due. And then they're suddenly like, hey, when does that evil capitalist landlord subsidy check hit? It's like they're allergic to logic, but they're so addicted to hypocrisy. And now they're all up in arms about the government shutdown. They're just so fuming and furious because their food stamp program got paused, and they're saying that the government's keeping us from eating. And then they elect a mayor who wants government-controlled grocery stores. So let me get this straight. You're mad at the government for temporarily stopping you from buying food, so your grand solution is to let that same government own the grocery store and decide when you can shop. That's not just bad logic, that's Stockholm Syndrome with a side of socialism. And here's the sad part. They think that they're feeding the hungry, but the mayor's plan is going to make everyone equally hungry. Because when everyone's broke, suddenly that equality starts to look really fair. So good luck with that. You'll end up at a food equality rally where nobody can afford lunch. And I can't wait to see that broadcasted over the news one day. But of course, they're just going to keep yelling, tax the rich, and the rich should pay their fair share. But they already did. They built your skyline, they paid your taxes, and they funded your free programs. And now they're leaving. And give it 6 months, and you'll be taxing each other's bodega tips just to keep the lights on. New York used to be the city of dreams. It used to be a beautiful place that everyone wanted to visit. And now it's a city of government programs. And the only thing free left in New York is absolute, complete chaos. So isn't it funny how Democrats magically want to discuss this shutdown the very next day after the elections? It's like clockwork. You could actually set your watch to their hypocrisy. For weeks, they've been screaming that Republicans were the reason the government shut down. Those heartless conservatives, they're starving families and they're destroying democracy. Meanwhile, they're the ones holding the door shut, locking the negotiations and tossing away the keys just in time for the campaign trail. And now that the elections are over, suddenly they're ready to talk. Now you want compromise. Now you want to come together for the American people. Give me a break. The ink on those election results isn't even dry yet, and they're pretending to be the moral heroes here. But let's just be honest, this whole entire thing was a setup. They created the crisis, blamed Republicans for it, and rode that chaos straight to the polls. That's been their playbook for decades. Manufacture a disaster, weaponize it politically, and then swoop in pretending to save the day. It's like watching an arsonist burn down a house, then rush in with a garden hose yelling, "Don't worry, guys, I've got this. I'm here to save you." You don't get credit for fixing a problem you created. You get a trophy for gaslighting an entire country. And what's worse is that the media just plays right along with it. Just watch. They're going to say that the Democrats reach across the aisle to end the shutdown after they lit the match, threw it over their shoulder, and blamed Republicans for the smoke. It's not leadership. It's manipulation. The sad part is it works because too many Americans continue to fall for it. The Democrats don't solve problems. The Democrats need problems. They need outrage. They need chaos. They need division. Because when Americans are fighting, the Democrats are winning. So no, I'm not surprised they're ready to reopen the government now. That was the plan the entire time. Create pain, point the finger, win the vote, and then act like the hero who just came to fix it. It's not even politics anymore. It's performance art. And the Democrats, just like those in college, they've perfected the act. And then there's Kamala Harris, who apparently has found her voice again. Do we remember her, the vice president who spent 3 years pretending Joe Biden was the second coming of FDR while he couldn't even finish a sentence on live television? Yeah, that Kamala Harris, she's back. And now she's out here calling him out, taking subtle jabs at his leadership, and suddenly acting like she had nothing to do with the train wreck that we had to live through for 4 miserable years. It's like watching a firefighter show up to the smoldering ruins of a house that she helped burn down with a microphone and a podcast. For years, Kamala stood by Biden's side, smiling like everything was fine, and every time he froze or stumbled or forgot what state he was in, she'd just stand there, nod and clap like a malfunctioning robot. And now that the political winds are shifting, she's concerned about his leadership. But where was that energy when he was debating Trump and couldn't even remember his own policies? She was standing right with him, right beside him, acting like the debate went great, and then acted as if America didn't just watch the president glitch out in 4K. But now she's doing podcasts again. What is she talking about? Oh, she's talking about leadership, vision, and the future of the Democrat Party. Kamala Harris, the same woman who couldn't get 2% in her own primary, is suddenly positioning herself for 2028 like we've all forgotten she's been missing in the action for 3 years. And let's just be honest, Kamala isn't rebranding, she's reintroducing herself, hoping America's memory isn't as bad as Joe's. She's trying to pretend like she wasn't part of the same administration that ran the country into the ground. And now she's out here talking about the next generation of leadership like she wasn't the vice president the entire time this one was collapsing. It's the oldest move in Washington, D.C. Distance yourself from the disaster you helped create and act like you're warning everyone all along. It's a political survival skill. And because she knows the Biden era is over and the Democrat establishment needs a new puppet to sell their voters, that's why she's coming back in. And that's what all this is. It's Kamala saying, please don't forget about me tour. Podcast appearances, soft interviews, vague hints about the future. It's all an audition for 2028. But here's the problem. You can't claim to be a fresh start when you were part of the mess. You can't call out the man you protected for years and expect anyone to take you seriously. Not that we ever took Kamala Harris seriously, because she was just a puppet as the vice president. She was a token vice president nominee. So if you stood silently beside Biden when he failed, you don't get to play savior when it's politically convenient and he's not in the picture anymore. Kamala Harris didn't just sit in the passenger seat. She actually helped steer the car off the cliff, and now she's standing in the wreckage saying, we should really have made a turn back there. This isn't leadership. It's opportunism wrapped in fake authenticity. And Kamala's not finding her voice. She's finding her next campaign slogan. And I have a perfect one for her. It should be, "We're not going back." But then there's Nancy Pelosi, and it's finally happening. Nancy Pelosi is retiring from Congress, and all I can say is good riddance. The woman spent decades destroying this country from the inside out, and now she's walking away like she just finished writing a love story to democracy. And the Democrats are lining up to praise her like she's Mother Teresa, and even Obama is out here calling her one of the greatest public servants of all time. This is the same Nancy Pelosi who spent her career dividing the nation, weaponizing Congress, and cashing in on every crisis that came her way. She never served the people. She served power. And she served it with a side of insider trading, virtue signaling, and a designer ice cream straight from her $24,000 fridge. They're now talking about Nancy Pelosi like she fought for the American people. No, she fought, but she fought against them, and she fought against the American people every single time. She fought to keep abortion legal up until birth. She fought to raise your taxes. She fought to grow the government and to silence anyone who dared to disagree. And that's kind of funny because also Kamala Harris, throughout her podcast tour, is saying that President Trump is now attacking his political opponents and weaponizing the DOJ to do the exact same thing. Where was she during the 4 years of the Joe Biden administration where they quite literally weaponized the DOJ to attack their political opponents? Do they not remember when they tried to imprison President Donald Trump? But back to Nancy Pelosi, when people got hurt because of her policies, she just kind of smirked and pointed at the Republicans and just said, it's their fault. It was a classic Pelosi move. And let's not forget, this is the same woman who tore up the president's speech on live TV because she didn't like the truth that President Trump was saying. The Speaker of the House acting like a middle school drama queen. And now we're just supposed to act like she's some graceful stateswoman. No, Nancy, you're not Mother Teresa. You're the political version of a storm that left destruction in its path and then claimed it brought rainbows in unity. And yet Democrats are out here treating her retirement like it's an end of an era and America just lost a hero. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just finally glad that she's leaving. She'll go down in history as one of the most powerful speakers ever, for sure. But power doesn't equal greatness, and history will remember her not for what she built, but for what she broke. And what she broke was the trust of the American people. So, with that, I say goodbye, Nancy Pelosi. Enjoy your retirement. You've earned it, not for your service, but for finally stepping aside and letting the damage that you cause in America to start to heal. Because the truth is, she's not leaving Congress as a saint. She's leaving as a symbol of everything that is wrong with Washington, D.C. But back to these elections, I'm getting kind of tired of watching the GOP and the Republican Party sleepwalk through history. Every election cycle, it's the same story. Democrats play chess, Republicans play checkers. And then they act like they're shocked when they lose. If the Republican Party doesn't get it together before the 2026 midterms, we're going to be right back where we were during President Trump's first term, watching the Democrats try to do everything in their power to undo every ounce of progress. And then the GOP is just going to sit there, twiddle their thumbs, and tweet about, we're holding the line. But newsflash, holding the line doesn't mean much if you're just standing still. The Democrats, for all their insanity, at least know how to mobilize. They know how to register voters. They know how to fund campaigns. They message emotionally. That's how they get all those women to vote for them. And then they get their people to the polls. But Republicans just sit on social media arguing about who's too rhino, who's too MAGA. And then the left is actually figuring out how to win elections. And they're also rewriting the rules at the same time. So if the Republican Party doesn't start playing offense, the Democrats will halt Trump's accomplishments over and over again, just like they did the first term. Then they're going to try to impeach him. And it's going to be this entire same cycle that we saw for 4 years in his first administration. They couldn't beat his policies, so they sabotaged him. They couldn't argue as a result, so they slandered his name, tried to impeach him, and then tried to imprison him. And while the Democrats were busy doing that, too many Republicans were just there, looking busy, trying to be bipartisan. And I'm just kind of tired of the same playbook on the Republican side. And it's time for playing nice to be thrown out of that playbook. We need to move on from that. We need a Republican Party that actually fights, not just tweets or complains, one that actually fights, and a party that actually knocks on doors and funds ground games, funds the grassroots, and please, hear me and hear me good. Recruit real candidates and stop letting the left dominate the culture war without resistance and pushback. Conservatives hate getting in this culture war, and that's why we continue to lose, because we don't even put up a fight. And if we don't show up in 2026, if we don't flood the polls and fill the precincts and fund actual good candidates, Democrats will take it all back. They'll block the border again. They'll raise the debt. They'll reintroduce every failed policy that President Trump has reversed from Joe Biden's failed administration, and then they're going to call it progress. And the GOP will just sit there and issue strongly worded statements while America burns again. It's just time for Americans to stop reacting and actually start leading. Stop waiting for the permission to fight for what's right. Stop apologizing for being a conservative. Stop letting the left control the narrative, because the truth is, this next election isn't about politics. It's about momentum. If the GOP can't organize and unify and show up now, there won't be a movement to defend in 2028. President Trump laid the foundation. He showed Republicans how to fight. He knows how to connect with working Americans, how to stand up to the establishment, and how to actually deliver results. But if the Republican Party doesn't back that up with effort, energy, and strategy, then all of those accomplishments that President Trump has made, whether it's the economy, the border, the peace deals, the America First agenda, it all goes back to the chopping block. So this is the message for the GOP. Wake up. Because if you don't, Democrats will start running the country again, and you're going to keep writing fundraising emails about fighting back, but you're going to be fighting back from the sidelines again. And it's not just enough to love America. You have to actually fight for her. And in 2026, that fight starts at the ballot box. So we actually have to go to the ballot box and fight for our country. But, after everything that I've talked about, the chaos, the hypocrisy, the division, the politics, it's kind of easy to look around and feel like the world is falling apart. And maybe it is, but here's the good news. Jesus is still on the throne. Nothing happening in Washington or America has caught him off guard. Not a single election result, not a single scandal, not a single lie from the media. Jesus isn't pacing around heaven wondering how to fix America. He's ruling, he's reigning, and he's still in complete control. And that's the part that we have to remember here is no matter how dark things get, our hope isn't in politicians, presidents, policies, or a country. Our hope is in a Savior who has already come before and conquered the world. The same God who raised Jesus from the dead hasn't changed his position, and he hasn't lost his power. So, yes, maybe the country feels upside down, feels so divided, feels so torn apart. And maybe truth is being silenced at times, and good is being called evil, and evil is being celebrated. But you and I, we don't have to live in that fear, because we know how that story ends. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, and no election, no government, no human agenda can ever stop the will of God. So as we go forward, we'll keep fighting for truth, we'll keep standing for what's right, and I'll always continue to speak out, but we'll be able to do it from a place of peace and not panic, because We don't fight for victory. We fight from it. And always remember, the battle belongs to the Lord. So take a breath, let the noise fade, remember who's really in charge, because no matter what happens in this world, Jesus is still on the throne, and that's never changing. We'll see you next week on the Battle Belongs podcast.